Hi, I'm Norm Stockton. Welcome to my home studio here in Southern California. I am here today with the Gallien-Krueger MB410 combo amp. Punch, headroom, tone, and even expandability with GK's MBP series of powered cabinets. 500 watts, driving 4 Neo 10s and a horn, designed and built in the US. Good stuff. In the normal manner, I'd like to kind of go through real quickly just an overview of the control panel and the rear panel, and then we'll go control by control and you can really hear what's going on. And as always, I want to really encourage you to plug in some earbuds or a speaker so you can really hear what's happening with the bottom end, because phone speakers or computer speakers don't generally do a very good job of that. Anyway, so here we go. Starting on the left side of the top panel, you have the input jack, you have the input attenuator, you have a gain, you have a contour switch, which is a bit of tone shaping. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then you have GK's active 4-band EQ. You have a boost knob, which again is a bit of tone shaping. It's the GK growl. We'll get to that. And then you have a master volume. There's a limiter on-off, horn on-off. There's an auxiliary in 1/8" stereo mini plug and a headphone jack. DI, as you can see, I'm using it today for this recording. It comes with a pre and post EQ switch and then a power button. And on the rear panel, you have the chain out, one of the most awesome features of these MBs. We'll get to that whole thing in a second. But there's a chain out as well as a fan that kind of keeps things running cool. So getting to the control panel now, control by control, here we go. The input jack, pretty self-explanatory, make sure you plug in there, otherwise your tone will suffer. And then you have your input attenuator, which is basically a 10 dB pad. So if you have an instrument that's got really high output, or you're playing particularly bombastically, or especially if both are the case, then you may want to do that, engage that just to make sure that nothing's clipping at the input stages. But if you're playing a passive bass or playing fingerstyle, then you probably won't ever need to worry about that. All right, then you have your preamp gain, and you have your contour switch, and that's a familiar function, a bit of tone shaping again, if you're familiar with GK's gear. It does a bit of a drop in the mids right around 500, and there's a corresponding boost in the lows and the highs, so kind of that smiley face EQ thing. It's not engaged right now, so check it out. Turning it on. It does that scooped out thing, right? And which that could be kind of a really cool thing depending upon what sort of music you're playing and what your bass sounds like. Disengage. I'll leave it disengaged right now just so you can really hear what the amp sounds like without a lot of EQ, okay? Then you have GK's awesome 4-band active EQ. It goes all the way back to the 800 RB that started it all. It's great sounding and very musical. So here we go. Let's listen to the highs real quick. Can really bring out some sparkle. I'm going to extreme settings so you can really hear what's going on. Right, so I'll leave that kind of flat right now. Then you have your high mids. I'll leave that flat right now. Then you have your low mids. Can really thicken things up. So pretty dramatic tone shaping. And then you have your lows, and I'm going to be really careful with this so I don't distort my recording. Really thins it out. Or some serious beef. You know, so if you really want to thin it out, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it kind of flat. Moving on, we have our boost knob, and this is the signature GK growl. Now this does affect the output a little bit, so when I turn it all the way down, it's disengaged. Halfway up. And it kind of just thickens things up. You know, when you turn it up to some of the higher settings, it will actually bring up the level. So that's where you work in conjunction with the master volume. By the way, you see that the master volume is almost off right now. And that's specifically because this 410 will absolutely demolish my shotgun mic that I'm using to record my voice right now. So I've got it turned way down. But I usually set my boost knob at about halfway up. I think it's a nice balance and it gives it some girth without kind of taking it over the top. All right, then you have your master volume, and again, that would typically be set in conjunction with this, your input gain or your preamp gain, as well as the boost knob. So both of those things will affect your output, and then this controls the overall output level, as is implied with the term master volume. Okay, so moving on, you've got your limiter on-off. The MB410 is equipped with a limiter, which is essentially speaker insurance if you ever have this thing outlandishly cranked and your speakers are starting to complain. You know, this just makes sure that they're not going to get blown. But this amp has plenty of output without ever having to reach that level. So that really is sort of a last resort. You know, if you're operating this at sane levels, you should be completely happy with the output level without ever having to engage that. But it's there as an insurance policy. Then you've got your horn on-off. This again has 4 Neo 10s and a horn. That horn adds some nice sparkle, especially for slapping or tapping or anything like that. So it's a tonal preference. You know, sometimes you want that sparkle. Other times, if you're doing like grindy rock and roll, you don't really want that sparkle. So you have the choice of engaging or disengaging that horn. All right, moving on. Then you have the auxiliary in, and that is an awesome feature for practicing. If you want to use this MB410 as a practice amp, you can use that to plug in your drum machine or your MP3 player, your laptop, whatever, and play along with your tracks. And then you also have that headphone jack, which allows you to plug in your headphones. It'll disengage the speakers so you can practice along into the wee hours of the morning without disrupting your neighbors. Then there's GK's great sounding DI. And as you can see, I'm using it for this recording. A lot of combo amps don't have great sounding DIs, and consequently, when you walk into the venue, you know, they're handing you their own DI, saying, "Hey, plug into this," you know. But the GK DIs sound awesome, and this also has a pre and post selector, EQ selector, that is, which is really great in case you have to do some sort of radical or dramatic EQ to your preferences on stage that may not be totally ideal for the front of house or the monitor person. So this gives you the option of sending them a pre-EQ signal. Then you have your power button. And even the power button on a GK amp is thought out and designed with intent. There's an LED around that power button, and when you first engage it, it's red until it's powered up, and then once it's good to go, then it turns blue. If you're ever getting dirty power, it'll turn red again. So if the venue has bad power, the amp will let you know, all right? On the rear panel, you have the chain out jack, and that gets to the heart of one of the coolest features of the MB series and the way it works with the MBP powered enclosure line from GK. This allows you, using a standard XLR cable, to plug into any of the MBP powered enclosures from GK. What's awesome about that is that at that point, the EQ and volume settings from the MB combo are conveyed to those MBPs, and you could drive up to 3 additional MBPs. This is a 500 watt amp, as I had mentioned earlier, driving these 4 Neo 10s as well as the horn. This 500 watt amp is allocated just to the speakers in this box, and that's not the case with most combo amps, right? Most of the time when you have the ability to plug in passive extension cabinets, you are never achieving the maximum rated power until the point at which you do plug in those external speaker cabinets, because of the whole issue of impedance, right? You need to plug in the external cabinets to drop the impedance load down to where you're getting the maximum rated power. In the case of the MB series, the entirety of the 500 watt amp output of this box is allocated just to these speakers. When you plug into the external MBP powered extension cabinets using that chain out jack, you're having access to the separate 500 watt amp in that box that's allocated just to the speakers in that box. So the idea is that you don't need to cart around more than you need for most of your situations. Now, obviously, this is a fairly capable amp. It will function in a broad range of settings, all the way up to some fairly loud applications, 500 watts into a 410 cab. But you may have times where you still need more output than that. Well, if you plug in a 410 MBP with its own 500 watt amp allocated just to its speakers, you end up with a 1000 watt 810 rig. But the idea is that you don't need to take around that whole 810 rig for everything you do. You can just save it for the one, maybe once a quarter or whatever, where you do this bigger gig. You can save it for that and otherwise just leave that 410 at home. There's separate video clips, by the way, demo clips of all of the MBP series. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. But it definitely is worth mentioning because the interaction with the MBPs is really key to the whole MB design philosophy. So the fact that they're so expandable. Anyway, awesome stuff. That's what the chain out jack does. Getting back to that rear panel, we also have a fan. Again, that kind of keeps things running cool. Very useful feature. But 51 pounds, which is not bad for a 500 watt 410. And you have the famous GK punch, features, bang for the buck. I think it's awesome stuff. And I always encourage people not to just take my word for it, though. Go to a GK dealer, plug into the MB410 or any of the MBs, and I'm positive you'll agree. But there's also more information if you go to Gallien.com. This is the Gallien-Krueger MB410 combo amp. Go check it out. God bless you. I'm Norm Stockton, and I hope to see you on the road.